everybody. Welcome to Bledsoe Said So. I'm actually quite excited to discuss tonight's topic. This is a text. I'll just go ahead and say it. It's called Zostrianos. And I have had this one on the back burner for a few months now to kind of get around to talking about this. And I feel like, and we discussed this, what was it? I guess last episode, because Revelation was a two-part. But the night that we began to record the two-part Revelation series, I was going to do this one, and I decided, Revelation kind of time sensitive. My son is coming. We're now 2 weeks away from the due date, so I was like, let me slide this back. But anyway, I've been meaning to talk about this for a while, and it's very fascinating, and I'm slowly working my way through the Nag Hammadi Codex, and I'm just kind of picking up all these different texts along the way, and finding how they fit into my life experiences and what I'm learning in real time. So I wanted to, so I'm sure you guys saw that we have new Patreon tiers now, which is super exciting for us because, as you know, doing this show is a labor of love, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of energy. And for us, it's like the idea of a normal life was kind of robbed from me a long time ago. And this is the only thing that I find myself doing anymore that has any real value. This and the Monroe Institute thing. So we're like, how do we figure out a way to include an option for people to donate to support the project, and come up with ways to assign some sort of return value to that. So now we have new tiers, and going forward, we're going to begin to give special thanks to our executive producers at the Light Being tier. So starting with Derek Longoria, Chris Epperson, Brian Lynch, Danielle Morgan, and then last but not least, our lovely individual who wishes to remain anonymous still, and he instead wants a message to be shared, which is that no matter how far you've fallen in life, no matter how much you've been abused, broken, beaten down, and just have wallowed in suffering, it's never too late for you to be deemed worthy of the love of God and to be saved from your condition. So he wanted us to share his message to encourage you, the listener, to always try to seek a connection with the presence of God and to know that you are loved and that you are worthy always. And thank you very much, guys, for helping support the show. And thank you to everybody who has helped us, who has followed us along the way, who has shared the message, who has continued to engage the algorithm, and who has done anything, like watched an episode, subscribed, liked, literally anything. Thank you very much. And this is not about money, but we are in a weird place where we kind of have to figure that part out. So I'm just being authentic. I'm just being very candid and very humble that we're grateful for anyone who was moved in any capacity to support us and what we're doing. So moving on, check out our Instagram if you want to stay current with our events. People are like, where do I find the Skywatch schedule? Where do I find the Skywatch schedule? Well, I'm always saying, always, you probably noticed for like 4 or 5 months now at the start of every episode, or somewhere in the episode, maybe somewhere in the first 20 minutes, I'm trying to get people to go to our Instagram so that they can stay current with their schedules. So I am not being bombarded with hundreds of emails or direct messages asking me when Skywatches are going to be. So check out our Instagram always for current events. Right now we have one that is scheduled, which brings me to my next point that I'll get to in a second, contact modalities. Check out our website, bledsoesaidso.com. And of course, as always, I've already kind of mentioned it, the Patreon. That's the best way that you can support the show and help us to continue to do this. And literally at any level of support, even as much as just clicking like on YouTube, we appreciate every bit of it and we don't take it for granted. Contact modalities. And Alex, I want you to kind of, talk about this one today because, as I've been very open about, I'm not going to be there. And that does sadden me. Here I am 2 weeks away from the birth of my son, which I'm very excited for. And I'm very, very excited for April 5th, which to my estimation will be days after his birth, where my son and I, with our little Tony Chopper plushie toy that I have already bought from him, we are going to sit there and we are going to watch One Piece return to TV together. So while I'm at home enjoying this new life with my little mini-me who has my wife's face, somewhere in those early days, Alex and my family are going to be going to this amazing conference known as Contact Modalities.
Yeah, absolutely. Contact Modalities happening in Delavan, Wisconsin on May 1st through the 3rd. I have not participated in this before. I did not go last year. I have not really been to anything kind of similar or any conference, and I am super stoked. The theme this year is Harmonic Ascension. You can purchase your tickets at contactmodalitiesxpo.com. You can come see me. You can come see Chris Bledsoe. You can come see Chris Bledsoe Jr. You can come see Emily. We'll all be hanging out there. And I'll probably just be off the wall, stoked, having a great time. Super looking forward to it. Going in with an open mind. I have no idea what to expect. There's a ton of helpful info on the website, but I'm just kind of going in with an open heart and an open mind, and I think it's going to be a fantastic conference.
It's great, and it's weird that my first conference, Alex couldn't be there, and then Alex's first conference, I couldn't be there. Maybe the energy is too powerful. we can't both be there simultaneously for the first one. I don't know. But regardless, it's going to be a good time, and I do regret that I can't go. All right, well, let me just get into Zostrianos. So, admittedly, I'm going to give a disclaimer here that usually when I read any sort of text that I talk about on the show, in my head, I'm sort of imagining that the listener, if I'm doing a well enough job, which I'm like, how could I know? I'm imagining that the listener would somewhat become intrigued enough to check it out for themselves and would be moved to read, to research them, to look into them. Because I am personally a big believer in firsthand sources. So if you want to learn about something, you need to go right to the source. Great. Listen to me talk about it. That's wonderful. You may learn new stuff that you've never heard about, but ultimately the best way to learn is to look at sources yourself with your own eyes. That's how I was trained in college. You know, we were like required to go and look at certain firsthand sources and then read books where authors are discussing them and talking about them in modern times. So you have to learn about the difference between like firsthand sources and secondhand sources. So in my head, I'm always like, I'm sure they're checking these out at home, right? Someone's got to be. Now, the disclaimer is this text that I'm going to talk about tonight, although it is profoundly interesting, I probably would not recommend it to my worst enemy. And it was a trudge to get through, and it is very repetitive. And when you Google it, it even speaks how out of the entire Nag Hammadi library, it is probably the most difficult one to get through. And of course, I read that after I sat there for a few hours and read it today. And again, it is very interesting, and it's very valuable, and it's very important to the Gnostic cosmology, but it's not exactly an interesting read. The material is interesting. It's like Lord of the Rings, and I know people will get upset about this. I love Lord of the Rings. I love the movies. I've seen them like a dozen times through, every one of them since I was a kid. The book, I've tried 2 or 3 times. Back when I was in high school, I was a big reader, dude. I would read books like that, like days. I would consume 700-page books. Literally, one time I read one in one sitting. It was Harry Potter 7, and it took me 12 hours. I was the kind of kid where if you gave me a book that was interesting, I would just blow through it. And I tried to read through the Fellowship of the Rings, or the Fellowship of the Ring 3 times, and The Hobbit, and I never could commit. And of course, that doesn't mean it's a bad book or it's anything like that. It's just the way that it was written was not necessarily engaging. It didn't keep me. It was very much over, and this is just my opinion. I know there's a lot of people that'd be like, boo, but a lot of people I do talk to who are diehard Lord of the Rings fans that say the same things. They're like, watch the movies. The books are amazing, read them, but that's for the super nerds. It's just the way it's written, right? The jargon. So that's kind of the case with Zostrianos here. It's not a bad text. It's very important, but the way that it was written was so hard to commit to. This is probably the first time that I'm going to come out and be like, let's just talk about this one. I don't think you're going to be very like, ooh, this is riveting material when you're reading it, because it's just enormous, repetitious praises to ineffable beings. and then little tiny bouts of exposition about the cosmology of the universe. And then it'll be like paragraphs and paragraphs of praises of beings with a bunch of Greek names. And it's like, dude, if they slashed out all that and then just had all the combined parts talking about the cosmology and the nature of the soul and the ineffable, they could have slashed like 60% of it, and it would have been like, oh my God, this is mind-blowing. You know what I mean?
Do you think in a sense that it might act as a barrier or like a built-in sort of initiatic thing where, you know, that maybe it's written in that way to deter a lot of people?
It could be. That's possible. It's definitely an initiatic text, because as we know with all of the Gnostic texts, they are in some way initiatic, purportedly containing, you know, the secret teachings of Jesus. Some of them, literally, they'll say like the secret gospel of John, the secret gospel of, you know, so on and so forth. There's several secret gospels known as the apocryphons, right? Like the apocryphon of John, the apocryphon of James, the apocryphon of truth, stuff like that. So yeah, no doubt. And I'm going to discuss that in the material, because I did read it. I actually did trudge through the whole text. Down till like 20 minutes before Alex got here, I was reading it and trying to finish it. And I was just like, dude, oh my God. It just fried my brain. It was so much of a mental obstacle to stay focused on the text because of the jargon. But despite all that, it is amazing. And in the nature of what it is claiming, it is profound too. And I'm going to go into all that. But there are moments in the text that are very clearly speaking to the nature of the mysteries. And at one point, it even mentions that so we've discussed this before a long time ago, but in Gnostic cosmology, particularly in Valentinian Gnostic cosmology, but tonight the text that we're discussing is Sethian. There were different schools of Gnostic thought in the day. Just like today, you have Baptists, you have Pentecostal, you have Methodists. It's the same concept. They were a group of people who had a similar idea, but they had like different little caveats on how they believed it, and they clung to each other, and that's that. There's nothing more. So there are three versions of human incarnation in Gnostic cosmology, and then they have slight disagreements in Valentinian and Sethian Gnosticism. So it's commonly known as the Hylics, which are, if you think of the NPCs of the world who have no measure of spiritual inclination or desire to connect to God or to be good or righteous or anything. They're completely material. They're completely trapped in the ignorance of the illusion, and they are, degenerate, and they show absolutely no outward signs of being intrigued by the mysteries or wanting to connect to a higher power. That is the Hylics. They are basically seen as being dead inside, that they are completely a material incarnation with no essence of spirit, and that they belong to the physical world, and that they are a part of the physical world. So that's the Hylics. And then you have the Psychics, which are people who are psychic, literally psychic, and they are spiritual, but they are still not fully awakened, so they have the disposition to, maybe they're connected to mainstream religions, maybe they, and again, this is Gnostic thought, this isn't me making this up, this is several thousand-year-old writings, right? But maybe they're connected to mainstream religions, and they still have attachment to the world, and they don't fully see through the illusion, but they are to a degree awakened, and they have psychic ability, and they have a soul. And then there are the pneumatics, which is the Greek word pneuma, which is soul. And they are like the fully realized or the fully awakened, or as the Sethian Gnostics believed, it was the descendants of Seth, who in biblical terms was the son of Adam and Eve after Cain and Abel. You know, Abel is slaughtered, and then Cain wanders. You know that story, right? He gets the curse mark of God on his head, and you know, you get the whole avenge sevenfold if any being would harm him, and his wrath is to roam the earth in terror, and he can't die. That whole story. So then after that thing happens with Cain and Abel, Adam and Eve have another son named Seth. So the Sethian Gnostics believed that they were the descendants of Seth, and that the divine revelation of these mysteries of God before Jesus Christ incarnated, they believed that an angel of revelation appeared to Seth, or even rather actually appeared to Adam and revealed to him the mysteries of his son and the lineage of his son Seth and how they would go on to be connected to Christ somehow. I haven't read all the Sethian texts, but it's interesting. Anyway, so back to the pneumatics. So the pneumatics were believed to be the fully awakened. In Sethian versions, they believe they're the descendants of Seth, and that they are fully realized spirit, and that they completely see through the illusion of the physical world, and that they reduce their attachments, and that they are, that at their will, when they are ready, they can fully awaken beyond the physical world and no longer incarnate here. So that's the pneumatics. This whole soliloquy was about, at some point in the text, it refers to the awakened ones as neophytes of the mysteries. And if you know anything about that terminology, a neophyte is a candidate to receive the mysteries. So we're talking about a Sethian Christian Gnostic text written in the 200s AD that we know because of the writings of Plotinus and Porphyry that it was somehow this school of thought, the Sethian Gnostics, were connected to the modern, at the time, Neoplatonists, who were Plato lived 400 years BC. For years and years and years, there were still mystery schools and wisdom schools devoted to maintaining the teachings of Plato, and they were called the Neoplatonists. And we know, because of these historical writers, that the Neoplatonists and that the Gnostics in many cases were friends and that they influenced each other. And what do we know about Plato? That he was an initiate of the mysteries, which came from where? Egypt, which, by the way, the author of this text, Zostrianos, which is written in the first person, and it is from the man himself describing his mystical ascent through the heavenly realms up to the highest Aeon of the lady, which in this text is referred to as Barbelo, the first emanated one. That Zostrianos even indicates that this is a big deal, that there may be a direct line of succession of his ancestry all the way back to Zoroaster. So we have an actual historical text here that is connecting so many different traditions at once. It's connecting the Greeks, it's connecting the Egyptians, it's connecting the Zoroastrian Magi, and it's connecting the Christian Sethian Gnostics. So that is a big deal. Because a modern day, remember what I say, the text is important, but it's boring to read. But that doesn't mean it's not important, right? We'll leave this one to the scholars. Read it. I'm never gonna say like, don't read this. I'm just telling you, it'll probably bore you. I'm kind of like being tongue in cheek, but check it out if you're curious. But there's a lot to glean from the importance of this text because it opens the door to the connection of all these mysteries, whereas in the modern world, we're supposed to believe they're separate because we're taught that they're separate. We're taught that Christianity has nothing to do with these and that they're pagan, but that's not the case. And that in this day and time, there were people connected to genuine Christian schools of thought before they were ruled as heresy in the 300s and then brutally suppressed and killed, and they had to hide their texts in Nag Hammadi, Egypt. And here we are today talking about it like it's such a mystery. But in the day, they were genuine Christian schools of thought. So for them to even use a word such as neophyte in a text that is connected to a group of individuals who are maintaining teachings of Jesus Christ and the biblical tradition, to use a word such as neophyte, there's a lot of questions that unfold. Because neophyte, for example, where can you find a neophyte? In the Rosicrucian tradition, when you go through the first degree, not degree of initiation, but that when you profess that you seek to become a Rosicrucian, you become, I'm pretty sure that first title that you receive is neophyte. And this word, this methodology of becoming a neophyte is someone who is seeking to become initiated into the inner mysteries, and thus having to prove candidacy to receive the mysteries. You see what I'm saying? So you asked, is it a barrier and is it an initiatic text? Yes, it is an initiatic text, and you could be right. It could be having all of this dialogue about praises to the higher beings and all these random Greek names that you've never heard of. It could be that. Or it could be that, to the ancient thinker who's connected to these schools of thought, that if you read between the lines, that they are showing you a level of ineffable cosmology through going through orders of magnitude, describing beings, saying things such as, the invisible one, the triple powered one, the immaterial one, and so on and so forth. So they're creating an image in the mind of the reader of a cosmology and scale of being that is ineffable and undescribable, that can only be understood through the ascent of the soul from the body through these spiritual realms. So hopefully you could kind of see why I would want to talk about this text so badly, even though it was a trudge to read, So Zostrianos, when you read like the scholarly interpretations of the text, is claimed to be, as I said before, a descendant of either Zoroaster or a descendant of like the grandfather of Zoroaster, whatever that means, right? And Zostrianos itself is a Greek word for a Persian name. So the point of this text is Zostrianos is essentially out in the desert. He is destitute, he's alone, he's suffering, and he's trapped by his vices of the physical world, and he has not received the spiritual mysteries or the baptism of the light. So he wants to kill himself, actually. He's on the verge of killing himself. And then an angel appears to him. And actually, I had highlighted the quote, I'm pretty sure, where it appeared to him. I highlighted a ton of quotes from this book because, if you slashed out about 60% of it, there was some really interesting material here.
Hey everybody, this is Alex with Bledsoe Said So. If you've been following the show for a little while, you'd know that I just had a child, and this has been one of the most life-changing experiences that I've ever been through. However, it has made me way busier, and I'm sure many of you out there are parents, and many of you out there are busy. But just because you're busy, it doesn't mean that your spiritual exploration and your meditative practice has to suffer. That's why I'm so excited to tell you about the brand new offering from the Monroe Institute. If you go to monroeinstitute.org, you can access the Gateway Voyage online. And this is the complete Gateway program guided by Bob Monroe that you can take in the comfort of your own home at your own pace. And when you graduate, you get the certificate that everybody else that's been through Gateway gets. This is absolutely incredible because now your time is in your hands when it comes to the Monroe Institute. So if you go to the monroeinstitute.org, again, that's monroeinstitute.org, and use code BSS at checkout, you get an additional discount. monroeinstitute.org, use code BSS at checkout.
So in the beginning, it starts with Zostrianos describing how he's destitute and on the verge of killing himself, and then an angel of revelation appears to him. The book of the glory of the eternally living words that I, Zostrianos, wrote, and Iolaos, when I came into the world for the sake of those of my generation and those after me, the living elect. The God of truth lives in very truth and the knowledge and eternal light. After I mentally abandoned my inner corporeal darkness, psychical chaos, and dark, lustful femininity with which I was unconcerned, and after I had discovered the boundlessness of my materialism and reproved the dead creation within me, as well as the perceptible divine world ruler, I powerfully proclaimed wholeness to those with unrelated parts. Although I had tried their ways for a little while insofar as the necessity of birth brought me visibility, I was never satisfied with them. Instead, I always used to separate myself from them because I had come into being through a holy, although procreative, birth. When I had improved my sinless soul, then I strengthened the intellectual spirit within me, and I was able to awaken from the dark sleep and find my paternal God. Although I had worked on this in every way, I was strengthened by a Holy Spirit higher than God. It settled upon me alone as I was improving myself, and I saw the perfect child, who he is as well as what he possesses. He often and variously appeared to me like a consenting unity while I was seeking the male father of all things. Things that are conceptual and sensible, specific and generic, partial and whole, containing and contained, corporeal and incorporeal, essential and material, and matters pertaining to all these, and the existence that is combined with them, and with the God of this perfect child, the unengendered Calyptos, the power in them all. So it has a ton of, Greek words that you've probably never heard of, describing ineffable beings that exist in higher levels of reality known as the aeons. And also, it's important to know in this context, when he says things like masculine, feminine, what he's talking about is spiritual orders. So, like, if you think of the myth of Sophia, how we talked about this in the Pistis Sophia, she looks up and she believes that she sees the light of the highest God, but in reality, she was looking down, and she became ensnared by the false light of the arrogant one. In this context, the femininity is referring to the archetype of being trapped in the material. And then in this body of work, when they say masculine, what they mean is like the intellect, the higher intellect of having the knowledge of gnosis, the gnosis of, understanding the higher worlds. So when he says things like, I'm, my femininity, he's talking about how he's trapped in the material form and he hasn't awakened his higher intellect. And then when you go to other Gnostic texts like the Gospel of Thomas, which is a different school of Gnosticism, this is Sethian. Thomas is not, excuse me. It talks about making the two one, the masculine and the feminine becoming one. So when you look at the complete view of the Gnostic thought, it's taking the feminine energy of experience and wisdom and receiving the mysteries directly. So that's the feminine. And then the masculine is like the logos. You think of the logos and the Sophia, or knowledge and wisdom. So the masculine is like achieving the intellect of the paternal God, the mind that has awakened its faculties, right? So you have knowledge and wisdom. So in texts like the Gospel of Thomas, where Jesus is speaking to his disciples of how to awaken, he says you make the two one. You must become masculine and feminine. You must make the two one. You must have knowledge and wisdom. So that context is important here. So throughout the text, this angel appears to him, and then it takes him on an ascension journey through the different realms in what is known as a luminary, and it leaves angels behind to guard his physical body as his soul is pulled out of his physical form by this angel and takes him on this luminous cloud up through the higher realms all the way up to the Barbello, which is very cool. At the end of the text, it goes out of the way to speak of her as the first emanated form. So when you think about like the lady, the Barbello is another. So you have the Sophia, but then you have another word for the lady, which is Barbello. And it's describing her as the mother of all universes, who is a truly real, existing, immanent being. That's what it describes in this text. He's like, and she's actually real. He kind of goes out of the way to distinguish that she's actually real. Whereas all these other ones, it's like, are they just concepts? Is it esoteric, allegorical concepts to try to personify the nature of reality? But he makes a point at the end of the text is saying the Barbello is real, and she is a manifest being. That she's the first manifest being from the mind of the invisible spirit, right? So that's very interesting. People are like, how are the lady and religion or Jesus connected? Well, I mean, it's right here. It's all right here in the Gnostic system, and even the Catholics, they say Mary. They took this concept that we have to use our lens here and think about history. Do we want to always just be good sheep and believe the powers that be? No, I don't. I am curious, and I want to look for myself, and I want to explore all of these mysteries and use not only my mind but my heart to decide for myself what I know and believe to be real. I don't need people in power to tell me what I'm allowed to think and what I'm allowed to read and what I'm allowed to believe. So if we study history and you look at things like the Holy Bible and its 66 texts, I'm not saying they're fake, but then if you look at, things like the Nag Hammadi library and you look at the history of them, you can come to the understanding that these other texts speaking of Jesus, although shockingly they may not agree with the doctrine that the powers that be gave you, they are just as historically genuine as the ones that the powers that be gave you. So there are two narratives of, and I'm trying to make this as simple as possible. There are two narratives of Jesus that exist. There is this historical movement, the Gnostics, that we know for a fact they were brutally killed and oppressed by the church, the same church that killed Jesus and slaughtered his people for 300 years. So we have this version here that's speaking of, this lady and the soul going on an ascension journey through the higher realms and eventually becoming one with God and dissolving into the original God. All this really cool mystical stuff. And then we have the version that the authorities gave us, which is like, by the way, you look at that other version, we're going to kill you. Back then, we will kill you if you look at the other version. You only believe this version. So pay up. You know what I mean? So that's kind of where I'm at. I want to look at the mysteries for myself. And I encourage everyone to do so. And just because this powerful multi-trillion-dollar institution that's 2,000 years old tells us we have to believe in, religion and Jesus and the Bible a certain way, doesn't mean that this other way doesn't exist and isn't a real part of history and may very well probably have been the actual original tradition. Probably was the original tradition. So anyway, back to it. So he says, there stood before me the angel of the knowledge of eternal light. And he said to me, Zostrianos, why have you gone mad as if you were ignorant of the great eternal beings who are above? Don't you know that you are a chosen person, and therefore you were informed about what you are to do so that you might now be saved? Never ever become destructive, nor pay attention to those you are familiar with in order to save others whom the Father on high will choose. Do you suppose that you are the father of your kind, or that Euleos is your father? You have a divine angel that has shown you the way through holy persons. Come and transcend these realms. You will return to them another time to proclaim a living race, to save those who are worthy and to empower the chosen. For great is the struggle of this age, but the time in this world is short. When he had said this to me, I very eagerly and gladly embarked with him upon a great luminous cloud, and left my molded bodily form upon the earth, guarded by glories. We eluded the entire world and the 13 aeons in it, as well as their angelic host. We were not seen, but their chief was disturbed at our passage, since our luminous cloud, a substance superior to everything in the cosmos, was ineffable, which means you can't comprehend it with the human mind. Its beauty shone brightly. It has an ability to guide pure spirits, since it is a vitalizing spirit and an intelligent reason, not like those things in the world that are made of pliable matter and persuasive reason. Then I knew that my inner power had overcome the darkness because it contained total light. I was baptized there, and I received the images of the glories there and became like one of them. So a luminous being, an angel of the eternal light, comes to him and says, come with me. I want to take you on a journey to heaven through the higher realms so that you can see the mysteries for yourself and that you can wake up. And a luminous cloud, well, an orb, because we know from the ancient texts that cloud was, in this context, referring to Ophanim, which is a race of angelic being, right? So it could be a stretch, but I like the stretch. It feels really good. We could envision that an orb, a divine angelic being, gently pulls his soul out of his body, like has happened to me, like has happened to my father, and many people in this world today. This is not a untouchable phenomenon. That's why I wanted to talk about this episode. So in my head, when I hear a luminous cloud, takes you on this journey, I think an orb, right? I mean, it's on my hat. It says orbs. I'm all about them, So I'm just going to assume it was an orb. And if you have a problem with that, you go come up with your own assumption about what it means. So an orb pulls his soul out of his body and takes him through the higher worlds and baptizes him in the mysteries at every level. And the archontic beings, who it even talks about how he passes through the atmospheric realm, going beyond the planets and then leaving the boundary of the physical world and into the spirit world. And at every level, as he goes through these higher gates of being, the archontic entities there cannot perceive him because his light is ineffable from this angelic being of eternal light and truth who is bringing him on this ascensionary journey. That brings me to another concept, something that I think is very profound, and it's what Rudolf Steiner called the guardian of the threshold. And that's probably the real reason I wanted to talk about this episode, because of the ascent from the soul, from the body through higher worlds, but also the guardian of the threshold. So in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, they speak of this, that when you die, but as we know, consciousness is immortal and it is eternal. So there are many levels of transitory states of being. Whether your physical body is still alive and the heart is still beating or not, your consciousness can go to higher worlds. I've seen it myself. Experienced it even. So in the state of death, the Egyptian Book of the Dead and the Tibetan Book of the Dead speak of a similar thing, which is that once you leave the body and you enter the realm of the dead, that there are challenges that present themselves to you in the form of gods and entities. In the Egyptian Book of the Dead, it's more literal in the sense that they say that the gods actually oppose you, or if you were good and if you were holy, that, it's angelic beings that guide you. Because in their myth, you have the idea of the heart being weighed against the feather, and then you either go to the field of reeds and you move on to heaven and you stop this eternal cycle of life and death, or if you were evil, demonic entities stand guard at the gates of the higher realities to prevent you from moving forward. And then it starts over again and you come back to earth. We did a whole episode on the Tibetan Book of the Dead, Egyptian one pending, because I have a guy who was actually supposed to be here tonight, but we had to delay it. He's a good friend of mine, and he's literally one of the world's most profound experts on Egypt. So we're going to do a longer discussion about Egypt later. But when you read the Egyptian Book of the Dead, it says all that about the beings trying to prevent you from going to higher worlds. And the Tibetan Book of the Dead, they're projections of your mind, of your karma. So if you were a negative person on earth, from the guilt and from the layers deep in your psyche, you're going to project demonic beings to challenge you. And at every one of these levels of being and these layers of Bardo, you're supposed to awaken. Or in the West, in Gnostic thought, we would say gnosis, because that's the Greek word for the awakened or the illumined. Gnosis, in the specific context, refers to a type of knowledge that is illuminating. If you think of the word love, they always say, well, love has 4 meanings. You have I don't know all the Greek words, but it's like agape, love of God. And then there's something like philos. And, there's 4 words. I'm not a Greek speaker, but they always say there's the 4 meanings of love. And it's the love from God, the love romantically, the love from a friend. And then there's another love. Alex is pointing at me about the love from a friend, or romantically. I'm not sure which one you were pointing at about. So gnosis, with that in mind, how Greek has very specific meanings of certain words and they're indistinguishable, that they mean that exact thing. Gnosis means a kind of illuminating knowledge that is like a profound epiphany, that you are essentially awakened to reality, to the higher wisdom. So in this context, as you're traversing through the higher worlds, you are systematically being baptized in the mysteries. In the Sethian version of Gnosticism, there are 5 baptisms. But as we talked about in the Pista Sophia, which is not a Sethian text, and by the way, I do recommend that one. It's extremely interesting. I think everybody should read it. Pista Sophia is profound. Yes, it's long, but it's worth every second. It's not boring whatsoever. And I believe it will stimulate something within the higher faculties of the reader, as it was designed. In that text, it speaks of the 13 repentances and the baptisms of the 24 mysteries, right? And then that each higher mystery, one being the highest, being the ineffable God, and then the lowest being 24, but also the first is the last because it's an eternal self-repeating cycle. The first is the last, the Alpha and the Omega. For I am the beginning and the end, right? But the first mystery being the highest level, and if you go straight there, then you don't need the other mysteries. It's the highest level of raising the light of your soul. Or you could be initiated into a lower mystery, which, what are these mysteries in this context? They are repentances. They are you reaching levels of realization saying, man, I feel really bad that I told my neighbor to go F himself when he knocked on my door and asked for sugar. I shouldn't have done that. In fact, you know what? I shouldn't do that anymore, period. You know what I mean? That is repentance. That is having a level of epiphany where you realize something you're doing is wrong and you shed that behavior from your being. So in this context of purification of the soul and being baptized in the higher mysteries, it's like your consciousness blooming from its crude state, being an animal existing in material reality, where that you could say rose, like in Rosicrucian thought, or lotus in the East, or the flower in the Toltec Mexico, that flower blooms, which is your consciousness from the center of your being, and many more psychic layers of understanding of the higher mysteries unfold, where you become more heart-centered, more loving, more kind, more peaceful. This is what happens as you go through this purification process and receive these higher mysteries. And as it speaks about in the Way of Initiation by Rudolf Steiner, a profound text, also highly recommend. You can listen to it on YouTube for free. It's like 2 hours. It's very short. It speaks multiple times about how the doorway to the secret temple of knowledge is only opened when you begin the first level of purification, which is to begin to be aware of your thoughts and the thoughts that you send towards other people. Are they harsh? Are they mean? Are they critical and judgmental? Well, you're not ready then. You're not ready for the higher mysteries. And it goes over and over to talk about how the highest level of magic, I'm kind of paraphrasing the whole crux of the text, but the highest level of magic is mental. So how can God give you magical power, which is the ability to exert influence on the world with your thoughts? How could you be entrusted with the highest power of the mysteries if you can't even be aware of and policing your own thoughts? You don't deserve it. So it's like Thor wielding the hammer, right? Thor can wield the hammer because he's worthy, because he's pure. But could you imagine if like the Hulk could wield that hammer? It'd be the end of the world. Or if, God forbid, like Loki or anyone else for that matter, Doctor Doom, anyone, if literally anyone could pull Excalibur from the stone, they could be king. And what if they're not pure? What if they're evil? So that's kind of the point of the mysteries. It's like you have to be worthy of the mysteries. But that starts here in your thoughts. So you begin the process of purification, which is what neophytes are entrusted to participate in, which is the inner purification of the soul. So they would do things like swear vows of silence, or they would do ritual fasting and purification, things of that nature, because in these times when the ancients were literally pursuing the mysteries, they were preparing themselves for what eventually this text, Zostrianos, is what would kind of considered be like the final level, which is when you work through all of these mystery schools and you get to the bottom of it and you realize that it's about purifying your soul and living from the heart and being Christ-like, that the final level of initiation is angelic contact. The ancient Templar Knights, the Rosicrucians, even Freemasonry has elements of this. They have Of course, I couldn't forget the biggest one, Christianity, the Bible, where Jesus is transfigured on the mountain, or like the Apostle Paul, for example. You know, he speaks of Christ appearing as a flash of white light and speaking to him on the road to Damascus and making him go, I think it made him blind. He was either blind or he was mute. I'm pretty sure he was blind. And then, you know, so many examples in the Bible of angels appearing to beings. So this is not just a secret thing. This is universal truth of the human condition. This is unavoidable. That the final level of opening your heart to receive the mysteries is what in ancient times they called Hecalot mysticism or Merkaba mysticism, which is the actual ascent of the soul through heavenly realms, through angelic contact, thrones, ophanim, seraphim, cherubim, literal, the ancients, Zostrianos, for example, which is why I wanted to talk about this. These beings, these people were telling you that when they received the mysteries, that it was through angelic contact. Orbs, beings of light, ascended entities from other realities, which they all agree. The lady's the boss. She's the queen. She's the mother. And she's real too. That's what it says in this text.
And I could be misremembering here, but this feels like, you know, out of all the texts that we have covered, this feels like the only one that was like very in your face about of essentially being abducted. Or,
he was basically like, abducted by an angel.
These angels took me. Yeah. The rest is kind of like for you to figure out, right? And this is just like, no, angels took me and showed me this.
Literally,
you know, like cite your sources. Yeah.
And that's exactly why I wanted to talk about this. That's what I said. I don't think most people would find it riveting to read, but it is equally important as all the other ones. And for many reasons, you know, the connection of the Christian system to the mysteries. Because if I'm like, Alex, what's a Christian? You don't have to answer. It's rhetorical. You're like, but you know, why not? What's a Christian?
Someone who believes in Jesus. That's kind of my thought.
Okay. Well, that's one answer. But then another answer may be, I don't know, a Methodist, a Baptist, a Catholic.
Yeah. I might be a little biased after coming to this show
But do you see what I mean? In modern times, it's difficult to define a Christian because there are so many sects of Christianity. Okay? But every one of them believe they are true. Right? And then you have, of course, the Protestant versus Catholic thing that started really big time in the 1500s with Martin Luther. So today it's like, okay, well, you have a million Protestant sects, and then you have, I'm not very well versed in Catholic. You have all these Catholic sects. Every single one of them individually is like, we're true, but they're cool too. They're you know, kind of on the same stream as us, but they have different ideas about it. It was no different back in this day.
I kind of think Catholic's just Catholic.
Well, I mean,
because I've been to...
There's Roman Catholic, right? I don't know. I really don't know.
I'm no expert.
Yeah, I mean...
But
maybe you're right.
It's more just like, I'm pretty sure the main thing is Catholics believe that the Eucharist or the you know, the wafer and the wine are the literal body and blood of Christ.
Wow.
And that's the separation of like when you take that as part of the Mass, you are in full belief that this is the body and blood.
So, and then you have things like Anglican, which is like the closest, one of the closest Protestant forms of like, it's Catholic, but not really. And then you have stuff like Orthodox, you know, so it's muddy. It's like, what's a Christian? I don't know. I could give you 100 answers.
Well, that's kind of like the follow-up question for me. Like I had to kind of frame it like if you're trying to get to know somebody and you're like, are you Christian? And then they're like, yeah. And then it's like, okay, what kind?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So back in this day, it was no different. And we have to understand Christ was not Christian. God is not Christian. Christ was teaching the way to God. And after he left, they all are arguing. Well, it's this way. No, it's this way. No, it's this way. No, it's this way. And then at this time, you had Orthodox, you had Gnostic, you had all these different ideas, but they were all there. They're all historical parts of this movement, and they're all saying the same thing, which is we're connected to Christ. Here are the teachings. You know what I mean? So that's kind of my point with this. But yeah, so I thought this text was important enough to talk about. Like you said, it's basically he was abducted by an angel, and his soul was removed from his body, guarded on earth, and that's kind of like, it reminds me of the Cape Fear River when my dad and my brother were having their experience. My dad was physically gone, and then my brother had these little luminous beings watching over him.
That's exactly what I thought of when you described the angels staying to watch over the physical body.
Yeah.
My first thought was your brother.
And they told that to my dad. They said, we're watching him. And then there were other times they've told my dad things like, we can take your soul out of your body and we can bring you on a journey wherever we want you to go. And your wife and children will think that you're asleep right there on the couch and you're with us in the spirit world. So they've told him that, the beings, when they took him in 2007, they've told him all kinds of things like that. So I know that this is real, and I've experienced this. And I had an experience 3 nights ago that freaked me out. And not that it was scary or evil, but it raised the bar for what I thought that I was able to experience. So, I have a lot of friends from a lot of places. I know people who are from like nearly every background, really. Eastern mysticism. I know Freemasons. I know Rosicrucians. I know Templar Knights. I've met people connected to Hermetic Dawn. Not that I still talk to them, but I'm just saying I've met, you name it, someone has reached out to me. People who are Tibetan Buddhists, people who are everything, really. And I have a really good friend, a few of them really, who are Templar Knights. And of course, I'm just asking questions. I'm trying to, learn more about that. And pick up methodologies that could help me in my practice. Because especially, I think that becoming someone who is in pursuit of truth means that you are in search of what is real. And, that includes a lot of things. That includes things that are Christian. That includes things that are Buddhist. That includes things that are Catholic. That includes things that are whatever. There's elements of truth in so many different systems that you can, it's kind of like a science, or as Rudolf Steiner called it, the occult science. It's like, going through and you're finding what truly works. And as you know, with being a scientist, it's Occam's razor, right? You want to reduce things to make it the most simple. To get results and to be effective, you need to make any process as simple as possible. So long story short, I'm talking to the Templars. I'm like, what can I do to up my game? And obviously you too, you're a part of those conversations. And they're like, prayer meditation every day, minimum 5 minutes. You don't know what to pray? Pray the rosary. I'm like, well, what's the rosary? I'm not Catholic. It's the Lord's Prayer. Oh, okay. So I did the math and I realized that, and I know there's caveats to that, but I don't know all the specific Catholic caveats like the Ave Maria and the 3 mysteries and all that. I just don't know all that. So I stick with what I know, and that's the Lord's Prayer, because that's a Protestant thing too. And I used to say it once a night as a kid. So it's kind of nostalgic to me. So he's explaining to me that there's a mimetic precedence to this. That, you have to imagine that there are billions of souls who have kind of like juiced this prayer through reciting the words of it in all these various languages, but also reinforcing it through belief. So you're like, if you think of all these belief systems as a cloud, like you think of like Wi-Fi, like there's cloud storage, prayers are like a cloud storage of divine energy. So I think we talked about this in an episode recently, but it's like, the idea of, opening the psychic aperture in the mind and then achieving coherence of the mind and the heart and then maintaining that state daily. So they're like minimum 5 minutes a day of prayer meditation. Okay, cool. So I've started doing the Lord's Prayer every day. And then Alex made me a rosary. I'm like, oh, this is really cool, but it's not stretchy. I can't wear it. So I'm like, well, this is a decoration piece. I should bring it up into the studio, actually. It's on my computer desk. So Alex inspired me. And I'm like, well, I want to make a rosary then, because I got, really fascinated about it. And wearing it is a reminder, as how it was explained to me. So I made my own rosary, this little bracelet rosary with a charm of a Catholic medal of the Lady. But the night before I made it, I had a dream. And in that dream, I was wearing an angelic medallion, which I actually have. I've purchased an actual medallion that has the name of all of the 7 classical archangels in Hebrew. So it's like a metal little coin, basically, or medallion that has the names of these archangels, and you're supposed to wear it to, invoke the angels. So I don't really wear it because I'm not big on jewelry, and to me it's like clasping it over and over is annoying to me, so I keep it by my bed. So the day before I made my rosary, I had a dream that I was wearing that medallion, and I had to take it off because it was burning me. Not because I was evil or it was evil, but in my dream specifically, it was burning me because there was so much power from it. There was so much angelic energy that I couldn't even handle it. I had to remove it because my flesh in my dream was being burned red. So I couldn't handle the power. So then I woke up, and that morning, it was a Saturday, I started making my rosary. I'm like, dang, that dream inspired me. I know it's about this rosary. So I made my little rosary, and it was kind of meditative. And I made my rosary. I've been wearing it every day. So I've started praying 1 decade of the rosary, which was 5 minutes a day of, the Lord's Prayer. For me, my practice. But what I've been doing, because I'm like, the state, well, that's easy. I'm like a Monroe Institute guy. I've been there many times. I'm a trainer with them, an outreach trainer, and I'm very well versed in their system and have done graduate level programs even, and I'm a big believer in their work. So I'm like, so you're telling me the psychic aperture is open within the brain by synchronizing the hemispheres? Easy. I've been taught how to do that just by thinking a certain thought. All right, cool. So what I started doing was going into Focus 15 at night as I'm laying in bed and doing the rosary in the Focus 15 state. Now, of course, the ancients, like the Templar Knights or people of the Egyptian mysteries or the Grecian mysteries or Tibetan Buddhists, they have certain kinesthetic anchors, such as mudras and things, and certain mental imaging practices to achieve the hemispheric synchronization without headphones in modern time, because they didn't have that back then. So they had all kinds of kinesthetic anchors and mudras and spiritual technologies and modalities to achieve the same effect. I've come to realize from talking to them that there's a huge correlation between what the Monroe Institute figured out spontaneously through Robert Monroe's incredible, vision and experiences, and what the ancients were doing. It's one and the same. And if you guys are really paying attention and you've heard every episode, you know that a year ago I had on Alan Evans, the CEO of the Monroe Institute, a wonderful human being, and she's a friend of mine, and we still regularly stay in touch. I was texting her today even. And I told her about this. I told her that when I was at the Monroe Institute 2 years ago for the first time, I had an out-of-body experience where I was in ancient Egypt. And I was inside of a temple. It might have been a pyramid. I don't know. I was inside of a temple. And I was in a sarcophagus. And I was doing the hand placement of Osiris. But it wasn't for death. I wasn't being killed or anything like that. I wasn't being buried. It was a ritual. And at the foot of the sarcophagus was a being of light standing there. And in this out-of-body experience where I was living in this past life, there was a second level of information above me where it was my modern mind watching this unfold, receiving information, while I was also firsthand seeing it through my eyes that I was in this coffin in this past life. So it was like I was bilocating, and my modern mind was there watching, but I was also presently inside the body of this person It's very complicated to, unless you've experienced it, it's going to sound like, what is he talking about? But I was there, and this being was speaking to me, and it was giving me knowledge. But I didn't hear it. What I heard was that second me above, the modern me, receiving the information that what I was doing right now in the Monroe Institute, going out of my body, was the same as what I was doing, not only me, but the ancients were doing in the ancient past in the mystery schools. That they were achieving out-of-body travel and all kinds of things to receive the mysteries. That there was a connection between what the ancients were doing and what they were doing at the Monroe Institute. That it more or less was explained to me that the Monroe Institute today is like if you think of how stalagmites and stalactites are in caves and they just kind of spawn into being from the cave, that you think of the cave as the mystery. And you think of all these different, what is the mystery? It's God. It's the soul is immortal and that it comes from another place, another world. And that we can leave it at will if we want to, you know? It's a whole bunch of things. The mystery is enormous, but it's one thing, right? So if we think of the mystery or God, the truth, as this cave, you have stuff like the Rosicrucians, Christianity, Hermeticism. It's another one I forgot to mention earlier. Templar Knights, Gnosticism, the Essenes, the Therapeutae of Egypt, the Celtic Druids, the Brahmins of India, etc., etc., etc. I don't know if I already said the Essenes, but these are all stalagmites and stalactites in this cave of mysteries. They're all just offshoots from the original thing emerging into physical being as a part of this one thing, but they're all connected to this one thing. And I just made that whole cave, stalagmite thing up right now, but what came to me in the vision was that that's what Monroe Institute is, that it was like a modern emergence from the spiritual world into the physical world in modern times with the scientific method of the West and technology, that it's all one thing. It's not about having a religious dogma, but it's about being connected to the truth, it's about experiencing truth, which is that our consciousness is immortal and eternal, and it could travel worlds by thought if you know the right techniques, which is synchronizing the hemispheres of the brain. So what's even more mind-blowing to this is a few months ago, my friend who is a Templar Knight told me that when you have your hands on each shoulder, like they show you with Osiris, that it is a mudra. It's a secret mudra to synchronize the hemispheres of the brain. So I didn't know that 2 years ago when I had that out-of-body experience and the information was being revealed to me that what I was doing now in my check unit at the Monroe Institute was the same as what I was doing then in ancient Egypt, I wasn't actually leaving the body. A being was speaking to me, a being of light. But I was connected across time and space. This was a real life of mine in the past. And what I was doing currently, we connected in consciousness and in thought and became aware of each other. And there was a being of light present, a luminous being. You know what I mean? I didn't know then that it was a hemispheric synchronization technique to have the hands on each shoulder. So it added another layer of complexity to this that just blew my mind. So my friend's telling me, pray, meditate every day, go into that psychic aperture state. He's never done the Monroe thing. So I'm like, oh, okay, I know what you mean. So I did my Focus 15 and I do my Lord's Prayer. So I combine the two and I've been doing them daily, and weird things are starting to happen because I'm doing them before I go to sleep. I know that was a long-winded exposition, but now I'm going to tell you what happened to me the other night. So as I've been doing this, I'm starting to realize, at first I could do all 10 Lord's Prayers. I can't anymore. Without fail now, after doing this for like a solid month or two straight every night, and I can't go to sleep anymore unless I do it. There's been one night that I went to sleep, and it's because I stayed up till 4 a.m. with a friend who was in town, and I was too tired. I was like, I'll do it tomorrow. Otherwise, if I don't start this process when I lay on the pillow, I cannot go to sleep. It has become cemented into my being. What has started to happen is round about like the third one, he told me that beginning to say this prayer and reinforcing this mimetic precedent is going to establish, or rather it's going to anchor this psychic state to the prayer. So not only are you associating with this actual prayer of the rosary to this psychic state, but you're also sort of tapping into that spiritual cloud of information from all of this Christian prayer and Templar prayer and Catholic prayer from thousands of years of billions of souls charging this energy. So it's a multiple layered benefit to this. So I've started to notice that round about the third or the fourth time I say the Lord's Prayer, my mind begins to fade away. And I begin to lose perception of that moment and drift to other places. Like I'm in between being awake and asleep, but I'm not fully asleep because, and the more I'm doing it, I'm getting like, it's starting to become so seamless that like some of those things I would know that they were a vision. They're like, oh, I'm out of body. Or, like if you're really well versed in the Monroe Institute experience, you know if you've like clicked out or if you've more or less had a lapse in consciousness, but you're not asleep. That has occurred, but it's getting to a point now to where the transition into these experiences has become so seamless that it's like being awake in a dream fully, and you don't know that you don't know the difference between awake and asleep. So it's progressed to where 3 nights ago, I'm laying there saying the prayer, and then all of a sudden it was like I started levitating on the bed. I know this sounds weird, but follow me. I started levitating on the bed, and then a light shone down onto me. It was like an orb appeared, and it shined into my third eye. And then all I could see was light, and I was being surrounded by light, and there was a being of light standing by me. Like I'm on my bed, on the left side of my bed, and there's a being standing there. And I began levitating, and I'm like, oh my God, something's happening. And I just kept saying, Jesus Christ, like, kind of guide me through this. And then it was like I woke up, and I was back in the bed, and I'm freaking out, and I'm like, that wasn't real. It was so seamless that I thought it was really happening. It wasn't a dream. It was so completely lucid and so like, oh my God, I really thought that was happening. And I even touched my wife's hand. She was right beside me, and she twitched, and I'm like, okay, I'm not, this isn't a dream. Like, but I didn't really just do that either. That was like a vision, but it felt so real. I was frightened as if it was really happening. There was, you can tell a dream and when you're awake, and there was no boundary here. It was so seamless as if it just really happened. It was like, what you see in a movie, like a false awakening experience of a lucid dream where you think you woke up, but then you're in a dream. And they call that false awakening in lucid dreams, where you keep having this series of, oh, I'm awake now. Oh crap, I'm not awake. It was like that, And then me and Alex are talking to our friend last night, the guy that we shouted out at the beginning of the show, and it was, anonymous. He didn't want his name shared. And I told him that story, and he was like, well, it sounds like your soul left your body. And I was so spooked by the initial experience, I didn't even consider that. I just considered, oh my God, I couldn't tell if it was real or not real. But then it was like, wait a minute. Yeah, I guess my soul was raising out of my body. That's what may have been happening, that maybe, I don't know, because what I saw was like there was a light that was shining on my third eye. It was like light was consuming my vision. But I could see out of the corner of my, I guess you could say my soul's eye, that there was a being standing there, but I wasn't looking at it. I was looking up, and there was a light shining down on my third eye. And I was lifting and lifting and lifting and raising towards the ceiling. So who knows? I mean, maybe my physical body was really laying there simultaneously. It's like Zostrianos. You know what I mean? So again, it wasn't a negative, frightful experience. What freaked me out was how seamless it was. It really felt like it was happening. There was no lapse in my thoughts, because a lot of times, like when I have out-of-body experiences, it's like you kind of drift away for a moment, and then it just happens. This wasn't like that. It was like it just happened. It felt like being abducted, honestly. It felt like being abducted. I'm beginning to wonder, did some sort of angelic entity straight up start to pull my soul out of my body? I don't know, but anyway, I wanted to talk about Zostrianos tonight because it's about that.
Yeah, that was wild, man. Wild.
Yeah. I was spooked, dude.
Yeah. Also, the text was good, and the fact that you're telling me not to read it just makes me want to read it.
Oh, read it. I'm just telling you, it might be hard to. It's just it's the style of writing is not very engaging, but it's a great text. I mean, the information, and I mean, there's so much more about it.
I might have to check it out.
Wow. Wow. That's a callback. Let me see if there's other. Let me go to the end. I think I highlighted the part where he talks about Barbello. God, I got so many highlights out of this. I am not about to read them all. Do not baptize yourself. Oh, that's when he comes back to his body and he starts preaching to the physical world. I came forth to the perfect. Yeah, that's the physical world. I could have sworn that I got the part about the Barbello, the emergence of the Barbello Aeon from the triple-powered spirit. Okay. The Barbello appears. Oh, and you have to understand that because this was a scroll that was written in Coptic and that was found in Egypt literally thousands of years after it was hidden. So parts of it are damaged, parts of it are lost. So there are some indiscernible parts with just like, they put like ... and then there's footnotes saying like this part of the text couldn't be recovered, but it's usually just fragments. But it says his ... within the ... like a fragrance it reaches the light interior to their aeon. It is a power that inhabits a part of the unengenderedness, for it always exists. It sought after him, seeing him there, and existing as a simple unity. Since he is blessedness and perfection, he was a perfect and blessed unity. She lacks his unity because she lacked him. It's talking about, if you remember the myth of the fall of Sophia and Pistis Sophia, his unity is God, the ineffable, transcendent, invisible spirit. He is perfection. He is unity. The lady, we'll just call her the lady, she sees God and can't comprehend the mystery, and she seeks to, not like Lucifer, like, oh, I'm God, but she seeks to be one with him. She's faithful. She's loyal, but she can't comprehend even his mystery. Does that make sense? That's what it's talking about. It sought after him, seeing him there and existing as a simple unity. Since he is blessedness and perfection, he was a perfect and blessed unity. She lacks his unity because she lacked him, since he would supplement her with knowledge, and his knowledge dwells outside of him with that with that which contemplates him inwardly. A reflection and an image that lacks ... and ... it would have fallen down. Therefore she came to exist outside his fullness. It was not for herself that she desired this aspect of her that she established outside the perfection. She became distinct because she is an all-perfect instance of perfection existing as contemplation. With respect to that one, she is an offspring that supplements him, even that which derives from his ineffable power. She is a prepotency, even the primal unengenderedness succeeding that one, because with respect to all the rest, she is a first aeon, or in other words, she is the first created being from the highest God. All who are pure because of the unsubstantial existence. It is she who grants rest. It is she who knows and who foreknows herself, truly existing as a single aeon in act and potency and existence. It is not in time that she originated, but she appeared eternally, having eternally stood in his presence. She was overshadowed by the majesty of his goodness. She stood looking at him and rejoicing. Being filled with kindness, she did not become separate. But when she was filled ... of the glories. And she is in an insubstantial existence and a power that truly exists. Remember I was telling you, he's like, she's real. It doesn't say all that for all the other ones, but it's like, she truly exists. There's no allegory about this. There is a mother of the universe. And another part of the book of Zostrianos, it calls her the mother of all. The mother, the mother, the mother. She is a power that truly exists. She is the first insubstantial insubstantial existence after that one. So, in other words, again, when God thought reality into being, the first thought was her. The first creation of the ineffable mind is the goddess, the lady, or as this text calls her, the Barbello. She's also known as the Sophia. The goddess is everything. She's the highest created being. And she told my father that the UFOs are her host. They're her army. When you hear of the heavenly host, when you think of God, it's like Shiva and Shakti. The masculine is the mind. What is the mind? You can't see it. You can't touch it. You can't feel it. You can only receive it. You can only experience it. You cannot comprehend it. You can't take a little device and measure it. It's invisible. A mind is invisible to the human senses. So God the Father is the invisible one. It is the ineffable, invisible spirit. When God projects into the physical world and interacts with created beings, it's through her, the first created being. So she's the goddess. So there's God the Father and there's God the Mother. This is how the universe works. In our material world, when we come face to face with the presence of God, it's as the Mother. Because we can't come face to face with the Father. It's ineffable to the human comprehension. Even the higher spiritual beings can't comprehend it. They can't figure it out. It's a mystery. It's the first mystery, right? So people have to understand the importance of the lady. This is not just some alien being. This is so much more than that. This is the queen of the universe. This is the highest manifested being. And then there is one higher than that, which is the eternity, immortality, the unmanifested being, the thing that has no cause and has no creation and has no ending. It is bigger than all of that. All of those concepts exist within this ineffable being. Everything comes from this being, the source of all thought, all reality, all existence is just streams of manifestation of God, the ineffable one. So when you think of the lady, you put some respect on her name because that is the first thought that he conceived. She's the queen of heaven for all intents and purposes. So anyway, let me pick back up. She did not become separate when she is... I skipped back a little bit. Let me go back to where I was. And she is an insubstantial existence and a power that truly exists. She is the first insubstantial existence after that one. And from the undivided one toward existence, in act move the intellectual perfection and the intellectual life that were blessedness and divinity. The entire spirit, perfect, simple, and invisible, has become a unity in existence and act, even a simple, triple-powered one. An invisible spirit, an image of the one that truly exists. The one. It is impossible to comprehend true existence, since it is her source, while she is an image. So it speaks of God, the one that cannot even be comprehended, the invisible one. She is just an image that projects from it. And even she cannot comprehend it, the mystery, God. She began to strive, since it was impossible to unite with his image. She saw its privation while it was next to his all perfection, since he pre-exists and is situated over all these pre-existing, being known as three-powered, the Trinity. And it speaks of the triple-powered being who is like they also call him the Orthogenes, which is just a Greek word, which is basically this text's way of saying the Spirit of Christ, the child of the Mother and the Father, that manifest into our world as awakened beings. So the triple-powered one, or the perfected child, is what we would say Christ, the consciousness of Christ. And, Edgar Casey talks about that and has this theory that Christ is this immortal spirit that has incarnated on earth many times. I tend to believe that. And I think it is not only immortal, but it's unlimited, and that it can be reflected in each one of us. And that I think that Jesus Christ is so important because he was the one in our real human earth history who fully realized this spirit on earth. And he encouraged us, you can do this too. Just follow me. The invisible spirit has never been incognizant. He did not merely make an act of knowing, but he was instead abiding in perfection and blessedness. Now when she, the Barbello, the mother, became incognizant, and she, body after, ... the text is fragmented here, in another way, ... enlighten, ... she was existing individually as cause of the declination. Lest she come forth any more or get further away from perfection, she knew herself in him, and she stood at rest and spread forth on his behalf, since she was from true existence. She was from true existence. She was from what truly exists in common with all things, to know herself and the one that preexists. Wait a minute. Let's scratch that back. She was from true existence. She was from what truly exists in common with all things. To know herself, or know thyself, right? And know the one that pre-exists. So what she, even the mother of the universe, has in common, what it says right here, with all beings, is that she knows herself and knows the one that pre-exists. What does it say in the Bible? Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, mind, and soul, and love thy neighbor as thyself. That's what Jesus said, the new law, the new commandment. That the old law is fulfilled and that there is a new law, to love God with all your heart, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as you love yourself. Or in ancient Greece, they would say, know thyself, for you are God. Right? That's the mystery. They're telling you the mysteries. Know thyself. That was very popular in ancient Greece. And, yeah, I had thought about, there was a couple of other interesting parts about the hylics, the pneumatics, and the psychics, but I can't, they were earlier in the text. But anyway, just a little bit more about the Barbello. Having supplemented him, they came into existence, and they are manifest through those who pre-exist. And through the ... since they had appeared as a second mentality, and they appeared through the one who foreknows him, being in eternal space, having become a secondary form of his knowledge, even the duplication of his knowledge, the unengendered Calyptos, and it's just a being that's like supposedly a really high Aeon who stands guard over the realities below him. Oh, remember I talked about towards the beginning of the episode, the guardian of the threshold, the concept from Rudolf Steiner. Well, in this text, the angel of the eternal truth of the light pulls him with a luminous cloud through the higher worlds, and the guardian at each reality, basically, or as they would say in this text, aeons, because an aeon is a plane of reality, but it's also, there's a being that is like the chief of this reality, and it's like they all look down beneath them and they're in charge of the realities beneath them, but they can't even comprehend what's above them. So Zostrianos got a pass. He was pulled all the way through by a high level being, and he got to pass through undetected. But there are other texts where, it speaks of trying to ascend through these higher levels of reality, and you come face to face with these aeons and archons. And their job is to maintain the realities beneath them and prevent you from ascending until you're ready to receive the mysteries. So I think that's a real concept. I think we could think of that as the ego, or I don't know. It's a mystery. But, as I was saying earlier, they talk about that in Tibetan Buddhism. Rudolf Steiner talks about it. As sick as he was, even Aleister Crowley talks about it. Rudolf Steiner talked about it. In psychology, they talk about it with the ego, So there's something to this notion that, again, we can't receive the mysteries until we begin the process of inner purification and enlightening the soul to become lighter and more free and full of joy and righteousness and kindness and gentleness, and not having harsh thoughts towards people, which translates into what? Words and then actions. Or as Zoroaster, the ancestor of the author of this Gnostic text, said, good thoughts, good words, good deeds, as it was revealed to him by the God of truth and light. So there's a connection here, right? Anyway, I think that about sums it up. I mean, I have a ton of highlighted material. I don't need to sit here and read it all. I did have some really cool parts about the 3 kinds of souls. I don't remember what color I highlighted them, though, and I'd have to... Oh, I think I found them. That easy. Okay. That was pretty simple. Now, the one who repents and the sojourner and the one inhabiting the perceptible world live with what is dead. They all resemble a single thing. They attain salvation apart from the dead. Now, none of them has needed salvation initially, but salvation is needed more now that they are degraded. As for the type of person that is dead, its soul, its mind, and its body are all dead. Sufferings of the subtle, fathers of material men, they are demons that the fire consumes. They are worldly, that is transformed. So it's talking about the Hylics, the people who are like NPCs and they have no spirit, and they're just materialistic animals who they're never going to get it. They're never going to figure it out. And that's a shocking concept. But then something, I don't think you were here from the recording of this with me, but when I had Dahlia on, her daughter Lidu said a similar thing. Her daughter's not read Gnosticism. You know, she's a 14 nonverbal autistic genius who learning to spell, and she's hearing people's thoughts. She's not sitting here reading Gnostic texts. You know what I mean? And second of all, like, what 14-year-old child is reading that stuff anyway? But unless you see angels and then you become obsessed with it like I was. But anyway, so something that Dahlia told me on that episode was that her daughter tells her that. Because I was like, well, what does she tell you? I don't want you to sit here and do the blindfold thing on the show and, dance for me and do a parlor trick. Like, I want to learn your perspectives that you've come to after living this life, dealing with her, hearing her thoughts, all that stuff. And she was like, well, and then she goes on to tell me, if you haven't heard it, stuff that Lidu hears from angels. And one of them is like something like some percentage of the world doesn't have souls. And immediately I was like, wait a minute. That's what it says in the Gnostic tradition. Interesting. Also, if we really want to, throw shots out there, kind of like the cosmology of the universe that Robert Monroe experienced on his visionary journeys from a complete lens of non-dogma. He wasn't even religious. He was basically atheist, and he started going out of body and traveling through higher worlds. It pretty much is in line with this kind of Gnostic model of the universe, that there's higher levels of beings. Not necessarily that they're evil, because they're not. They're not all evil. And that they are like kind of guarding realities beneath them, and that they come to you and they pull you along through lives to help you learn lessons. And that, essentially we all come from one source. And he created the term louche. People misunderstand that term. And what he meant by that was that for better or for worse, there are entities in the higher worlds that are charged by our emotional energy. Yes, there are negative beings who harvest our fear, the satanic dark force, but there's also positive beings too, that when we give them our love and our joy and our gratitude, it charges, the angels, and they get excited and they do dances in the sky and they shoot around, and they connect to your heart. But anyway, so there's something to this whole Gnostic cosmology thing. So back to the Hylics, or past the Hylics. Now we're on the psychics. The second type of person is the immortal soul that inhabits dead things, concerning itself with them, for it then undertakes a search for particular benefits, and it experiences bodily suffering. The soul is treated corporeally and it forgets that it has an eternal God it associates with demons. Now the humanity in the sojourn, if it inwardly possesses a discovery of the truth, it is far away from the deeds of others who lives wickedly and stumbled. And then we're on to the third type, the pneumatics, the fully awakened human incarnations. The people who have a deep need to seek the mysteries. As for the type of person that repents, if it renounces dead things and desires real things, immortal mind and immortal soul, it is going to be zealous about them by first undertaking for itself an inquiry, not just about action, but of the results. Remember I talked about being someone who's in search of the truth. It's like being a scientist. I don't care about all that fluffy crap. I want what's real. I want what has results. I want what truly connects me to the other side. Cut the crap. You know, that's what I'm getting at here. It becomes more or less a science in the search of truth. From this he receives another way of thinking. The entire place and every attainment will be his. Now the type of person that can be saved is the one that seeks itself and its intellect and finds each of them and how much power this type has. The person that has been saved is one who has not known about these things merely as they seem to exist, but one who is personally involved with the rational faculty as it exists in him. He has grasped their image that changes in every situation as though they had become simple and one. For then this type is saved who can pass through them all. He becomes them all. Whenever he wishes, he again parts from all these matters and withdraws into himself, for he becomes divine, having withdrawn into God. So in other words, you separate yourself from the trap of the material world. You begin to, purify yourself and retreat into the mysteries and desperately walk the path of seeking God. You don't care about all this crap out here anymore because you're in pursuit of the truth and connecting to the other side, which is where you come from. So that's a wrap. Any thoughts on that one? You asked me not to throw you to the frickin' wolves, and just kind of...
I enjoyed it. I didn't know what to expect, and I enjoyed listening to you talk about the Zostrianos writings.
Awesome.
I had to check my notes, make sure I got it right.
Before we started, Alex was like, don't just hang me out to dry and just catch me off guard and be like, what do you think about that? And I don't have time to think about it. So this time I waited till the end. Well, I did ask you a couple things, like what is Christianity, but that's different.
Yeah. I'm a little more familiar with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, good job.
Awesome. Thank you. Say your prayers, do your meditations, stay connected to the Spirit, and continue to be positive and continue to be a light. Remember that we are called not only to be monks, but to be warriors. And we are in spiritual warfare right now. So we have to remember to charge ourselves with the presence of the divine. We have to constantly stay connected to the presence. So you need to be doing your things in your daily life that keep you connected to this presence. So try it. Do your prayers, do your meditations. And if you don't want to do Christian prayer, that's fine. Do mantras, do something, but do something that's real. So anyway, love you guys. Have a great week. And, we'll see you next time.